When Ainul Md Razib first started posting about tech careers on TikTok, almost no one in Singapore was doing it. And while most of the platform was filled with dance trends and food reviews, Ainul chose to talk about coding and professional growth, and she became one of the first local creators who was focused on career. Today, Ainul is a cybersecurity engineer at IBM, and she is known online as Ain Loves Code. She's been named to the Singapore 100 Women in Tech 2025 list, and her work continues to champion diversity and inclusion in the industry. In this episode, we explore Ainul's journey, including the pressures of visibility, the boundaries she's had to set, and also the internal work that has kept her going through all the highs and lows of being a creator. Let's dive in. Every Edits History interview runs about 60 minutes, but only 2/3 make it into the final cut. The rest, the 33% that I left behind, actually lives in the Annotations newsletter. This is where I share the insights and step-by-step strategies that happened after the mic was turned off. Think of this as your companion guide to the episode. You can subscribe to the Annotations newsletter at cheryllau.com/email. Again, the link is cheryllau.com/email. I know when you first started creating content, what did you think you had to do in order to be taken seriously as a content creator?
I love that question because I've been getting this question more often because people now see me as more accomplished. But I think when I was first starting out, there wasn't really content on tech career advice, on coding. And I knew this because, I've been consuming content by other creators in like the US, in Canada, in the UK, where talking about career advice isn't completely rare. But in Singapore, especially during like the peak of TikTok, that's where most of the content is like comedy, back then sort of like dancing trends, food, travel. So the education niche back then was pretty small. So I knew that my kind of content wouldn't be, it will be like probably one of the first pieces of content there.
Actually, when did you start your creator journey?
Good question. So I started when I was still in university. Everyone was in lockdown. That's the typical like start, right, for a lot of TikTok creators. The content that I consumed from like the US creators, from creators I really looked up to on Instagram and on TikTok, for them, they already know sort of like their own trend, right? So for me, it's more of what can I share that people might be interested in. But I think where I got so-called my big break was a few years later. For some reason, some of my videos started getting viral. I think it was during the height of like tech jobs, like all the newspapers talking about how tech has high salaries. And there was a lot more push for like coding boot camps and tech boot camps. So my content back then was very relevant. But in like the past few years, sort of like with all the tech layoffs, it's a lot more, to put it simply, like tech creators like all over the world were thinking of being more like low key because they were aware like, oh, there's a lot of these like tech layoffs. Why are these tech layoffs happening? Is it because like we were being very revealing in our vlogs? And I think there was also a point in time when people sort of like despise tech creators because tech career creators like me, because now is such a difficult the past few years, not just this year. The past few years has been a pretty hard job market. And then here I am talking about, hey, here's how to break into tech when it's an oversaturated job market. People are lucky to get to like land jobs. So I don't have someone to sort of like follow the path of, because the education niche, again, is still relatively new. It's either, if it's not the usual content that I mentioned earlier on, it is usually like finance. So career advice, mostly on LinkedIn, as you would know.
That's such a good point about how you don't really have a path to follow. Tell me more about that, because, and you mentioned, we are in Singapore right now, and you are one of the few, I believe still one of the few career creators, tech career creators in Singapore. What are some of the pressures or challenges you feel like you've had to navigate?
When I was still adjusting, I guess, to content creation, right? After the first few viral hits and then my content being a lot more quieter, to put it simply, it did make me think like, how do I, like, what exactly is the message that I want to communicate? Because yes, viral content is, oh, here's 10 skills you should learn. Here are certifications you should learn. Here's how much you can earn. Here's how much I'm earning, which I rarely talk about. Here's how much they are earning, how much you can earn in this role. And I feel like in the US, when they talk about money, it isn't as spicy. It isn't as polarizing as compared to Singapore. Like I'll be honest, as someone who lives in Singapore, there is that sort of like that complexity of elitism, right? And I find myself in a very privileged position where not a lot of people are in. So that's what I was usually thinking about when it comes to my content. It isn't just me making content or me sharing how cool I am, but it's also how can this help my community. And I think where I reached that point was when I had a few people message me saying, hey, I'm a woman. I didn't know I could do this kind of job. I didn't know any woman who does coding like you do. Or, I'm a Muslim woman who also wears a hijab, and knowing that there's someone who looks like me talking about her career in tech, and especially giving career advice. It's the sense is a complex combination of ungatekeeping knowledge and also sort of like peeling back how good other people have it when usually people don't usually share. I feel like that's the tricky part about content creation. And because I can't really refer to anyone, there isn't a lot of career advice creators in Singapore. Most of the time, I have no idea what's going to happen when I post this piece of content. I don't have sort of like a base of reference compared to US creators. Obviously, the markets are different. The way of landing a tech job is different. The education, how we even talk about money, about career opportunities, about skills, it's very different in Singapore, in Southeast Asia, and in the US. So I think the scary part about going on that journey relatively alone, because I'm talking about a topic that a lot of people don't talk about, I have no idea whether it's considered as ungatekeeping too much or oversimplifying something.
That is such a like complex and kind of like delicate position that you're in. And you know, just listening to you, okay, the buckets that I'm hearing, the buckets of pressure that's unique to your specific creator niche or category right now. So number one, I'm hearing is just the fact that regionally or locally, there's the kind of content, career content or career advice that you could offer is very different from the global content, because, you know, there's the career context is different. So that's one layer. The second layer is just by nature of being a Muslim woman, you know, there's a certain level of representation that you carry for your people. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing that I'm hearing is also just as an individual, there are things that we want to keep private sometimes. Yes. And so these are kind of the three different tiers of like complexities that I'm hearing. Am I missing any other categories?
No, I think you wrapped it up pretty well.
Okay. So when we put all these three tiers of complexity, then like, how do you even decide what to share and what not to share?
Love that question. So I think, and I love how you also brought up how like I'm a Muslim woman, and I think that I see it as adding complexity, but for me, as someone who is forgetful, who overthinks, I think that's where having a lot of rules or like clear principles helps. So in Islam, actually, there are certain topics that are unadvisable to talk about. Not in the sense that you are forbidden from talking about it, but it's more of people would usually perceive you negatively. So one of those topics is sort of like your wealth. So that's where, during the height of tech content, a lot of people are talking about, oh my gosh, I have my office pantry, this extensive office pantry. Here's how I break down my 6-figure salary every month. And not only in terms of like my Islamic values of keeping, wealth private, but also in the context of Singapore, I feel like we talk a lot about wanting to live a very like rich, very luxurious life, but also acknowledging that Singapore is very expensive to live in. So to me, I think to some level, when it comes to talking about income and salary, to me, it felt very weird. So when I bring it back to how do I know what I can and cannot post or what I can and cannot talk about, the first layer that helps guide what kind of content I want to talk about is definitely my faith as a Muslim, my faith Islam. But I think the second layer is also my career, because in the end, I'm still, working full time and I intend to keep it that way. Okay, my concern, not exactly a fear, my concern is that when I share too much about what I'm doing at work, what kind of projects that I'm doing, my fear is that my company or other companies will see what I post and they will take it as, oh my gosh, she is revealing proprietary information. So now whenever I start a new job, I would usually have schedule a call with my manager and say, hey, I have this social media thing. And in some case, in the best case scenario, they know that I post on social media because again, I'm one of the few creators that do so. Usually I'll talk about, hey, I post about like tech careers and career advice on social media. And I already have rules, don't promote hiring opportunities at other companies. The AI topic especially is so hot that personally, even for me, I don't usually, there are specific applications of AI that I don't usually talk about. And usually I would just have a sensing like, hey, is it okay if I post about, like when it comes to talking about my career, where are the boundaries? Are there any like overall general content that I can't post? And that helps me sort of like guide what are the things that I can and cannot post about my job specifically. And I think the third layer is also how it could reflect on my family, because I have relatives, family members who see my content. Hi, everyone. They are, and my fear is that if I talk about salary, if I talk about how good I have it or how chill my job is, that could be a reason for envy. Like in Malay culture, we have something called mata merah, where people within your community aren't happy that you have success. For a multitude of reasons. I think we talked about this briefly when I was your coaching student, and I think what a lot of creators my age would do, like a lot of younger creators, Gen Zs as you would call it, they would say like, who cares about that, right? I post whatever I want. It's like it's all up to me. If they are jealous, let them be jealous. But I think there are some things where it's sort of like trying to not put myself under more scrutiny that I'm already putting myself in as a public content creator, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and what really stands out to me is how there are a number of parameters that you have opted to put on yourself around the content you share. You have your own value system that guides the content you create. And that makes me think of how there are probably other creators who just disregard having constraints on their own content, and they will choose to talk about the catchy things like salary or like behind the scene, the day in my life of my corporate job, for example. And those things probably do well just because they are trending formats more often than not. And I think that really stands out to me, because whereas other people will not have any constraints on their content, but for you have chosen to follow your value system, and you have seen growth since starting, and that really
Slowly.
stands out to me. Yeah, no matter how big or small you feel like your growth has been, for me as a third party, I have been very in awe at what you've created through your work as a creator, not even talking about your professional work, but just as your work as a creator, I've been very impressed, which is why you're here on this show. So like, I want to ask you, what do you think has helped you with that growth? Like, because sometimes you don't talk about the trending topics. So if it's not the trending topics, then what is it about you or your content that resonates?
Good question. Like, very good question. So I think a big part of it is, as you know, all the like in amidst the lingo of how to make high performing content, it's what we call aspirational, right? Inspiration and aspirational. I was sharing piece of advice or sort of like a profile that people didn't know could be even be possible, but once I share it, they realize, hey, this is something really cool. This is something that I don't usually hear, and it's something that they see as very successful. And I think that's what made people sort of like follow along. Most of the time they follow it silently, but at the same time, I think another big aspect of my content creation journey is also what I do offline. So yes, I have a full-time job, but I also volunteer, and that really comes down to my own, like, I really want to see more Muslims like me, more Muslim women, Malay Muslim women like me in the tech industry. Social media is one avenue for that. So that's why, I volunteer. I talk about my experience. I basically show up and introduce myself as like this cybersecurity engineer or this software engineer. And people saw like, oh, wow, this like is very rare to find someone like me. And I think that's where people sort of like recognize me or follow along. I was just at an event earlier on, and I had a few people come out and say, oh, I recognize you from your TikTok. Thanks a lot for the content that you make. And I think amidst all like the viral videos with a whole bunch of like millions of views, I think there is also a quieter factor, push factor of why a video might be particularly attractive is also, does it resonate with my audience? And I think that's why now my social media is sort of like, it helps to amplify my achievements and share my story, but it's also a way for me to sort of like document how I'm doing it and sort of like showing to people like, hey, this is my story that might not be, talked about in mainstream media.
Right now, as I'm hearing you talk about, what resonates or what guides your content, I can't help but think like, wow, like you know what you're doing. That's the impression I'm getting. But I'm sure that wasn't always the case. I'm guessing, just like many creators, you might have had your own share of like, oh, is my content working? Is it resonating? Is it even worth it? Is that a correct assumption?
Yes. I tell myself that I'm notorious for having really long social media breaks where I don't post, and guys, Cheryl has been trying to help me with this and trying to help unblock my brain, because I think at some point I realized like, oh, I have to portray a certain polish to my content, a certain like editing style or a certain way of talking about my points. And it's sort of like how I've built this platform of being like relatable and inspirational and aspirational. But now that I am what I see as like, somewhat successful, and I try to, push that to my content and it's not performing, any creator would sort of like be shaken by it, if that is the right word. But I think what has really helped me is a lot of internal work. And I feel like this is something that a lot of viral creators, a lot of younger creators especially, don't do enough, in the sense that they want to be famous, they want to be viral, they want to get brand deals, which is a very reasonable motivators. But at the same time, because they are so gung-ho about chasing that social media success, that I feel they don't give themselves enough time to really process whether that is something that they are prepared for. And I think virality is not always the best option, right? Virality can also be bad, where people twist your words and make you feel like you have completely lost the narrative, or just like completely misunderstanding your content, and you're like, wait, what? I didn't want this. This is not who I am, and that kind of stuff, right? When it comes to creating content, I feel like no matter what level you are at, you really have to check yourself whether it fits your message, your intention. Because I think when we focus too much on trending and viral formats, right, it sort of like takes away not just from the message that we're trying to convey to our audience, especially for value-driven / educational creators, but also does it resonate and align with your own personal values? So if one of those is missing, then it feels like you are chasing the algorithm, as people would say.
I want to go back to the point just now where you mentioned that a lot of people, they're like, yeah, like I'm ready for anything. Like if it goes viral, great, I'm ready for it. I want to actually put you on the spot and pull up a piece of content where you went viral and you were like, oh my gosh, like I was not ready for this. Is there a piece of content that where this happened?
Let me see. So there is one video here where I'm reacting to this creator. So basically, she was saying how she I think this was one of the first sort of like economic downturns. Not economic downturns. That sounds so bad. But basically, it's when a lot of people were having trouble trying to land a job, and this woman was sharing how she's applied to a whole bunch of jobs, trying to look for, and she was just not getting it. And this is way early, like years ago, when people were all raving about how to optimize your resume, how you shouldn't just describe your job as like the task, but also talking about the achievements in that job.
For almost 2 months, I've been sending multiple resumes out there, searching for a social media manager role or whatever.
Hi Andriana, I saw your video on my FYP and I have a few things that might help. My name is Ain and I'm making a lot of videos about career advice and how to get a tech job. Find them in my career tips playlist and my job before grad playlist. Both of these playlists are on my page, and I also have cover letter and resume templates in my link in bio. If you have any questions or you need some extra help, feel free to hit me up in the DMs.
That made me sort of like lock in a bit on, maybe people want resume content. But in the past years, I don't make resume content anymore. And that's because I realized that I think to be fair, that was like 2021. I was still like in my first year of working. So that is the advice that people have told me from like career coaches, interviews and that kind of stuff. But after, multiple tech layoffs in the industry and seeing, how the global economy has really shifted to what I see as more and more people pursuing entrepreneurship and not working in corporate. That made me realize, like, wait, do people, like, a lot of people do have the experiences and the skills, and some of them are trying their best. But what I realized from that piece of content, even like as I keep looking back, wondering why doesn't this content work anymore? I realized like it worked back then because that was the key topic. But now the reason why that advice wouldn't really work anymore is because the way that people approach careers has changed. And I feel like that's a tricky part about any content creator. When they grew rapidly, they feel locked into a certain piece of content and they don't give themselves the opportunity to understand why. So if I were to still make resume content, I think I would not have gotten as many achievements as I would have had now. I think I would still be someone who is still following the algorithm. But now I feel like, at least, more importantly, I can look back at the content that I've made now and be like, at least I can bear watching my own content rather than, why did I even make this?
I really appreciate you for sharing this piece of content with us and walking us through the growth and maturation process that has happened since then, and also acknowledging that, yeah, like that format, that content type worked back then, but like it's not
different now.
It's gonna land today. And so I really appreciate how you have showed us how there is a growth journey to all of us who are creating content on the internet. Okay, I'm gonna hard pivot here.
Yep, sure.
And talk about balancing it all? That's a hard question in my opinion, because whenever someone asks me, especially back when I was side hustling, they were like, "Oh, how are you balancing your work and your podcast and building an online business? Like, how are you balancing it all?" And like, I would just look at them and be like, "I don't know. I just do it." And so like, I really struggle to give people a good answer that like is helpful. But I want to throw the ball in your court and ask you that exact same question. How are you balancing it all?
No, I feel like that's a really important question, right? And I feel like when people walk up to me and say, "Hey, I really resonate with your content," sometimes they also accompany it with like, "How do you have time? How do you balance?" And I think I also had a very similar experience of how do I explain it. Like the short answer is I have no idea. I just do it. But I think like when it comes to side hustling as a content creator while juggling a full-time job, having spoken to other creators who are also in the same position as me, I think it comes down to how like content creation is something that fills my cup. Especially in Singapore, we usually are told what to do. Study this subject, go for this career, get married, have children, and all that kind of stuff. We are usually told what to do. To a certain extent, we feel like it's tricky to have agency over our own thoughts, over our own perspectives. We usually follow what the community says, or we hate what the community says, but we don't know enough about ourselves to acknowledge why do I hate that. And I feel like and this is still relevant to how do I balance it all. And it isn't so much balancing, but it's more of, it is, I guess, a part of me by now. In a sense that, like, whenever I introduce myself, actually, in some cases, I don't even introduce myself now, because when I go for networking events, I've known enough people from my networking and volunteering and from my social media that I'm the one being introduced. And sometimes when I hear that introduction, and I feel like you're also like resonate with this, where when people introduce you, it's sort of like a third person view of, oh my gosh, did I really do that? Yeah, I do that, but did I really do that? And I think it's not work-life balance. And I feel like this is a really hot keyword like in the past 10 years. But I think what struck me when I went to a networking event where I had like founders and female tech leaders share their own experience, is more like work-life integration and prioritizing what matters. Like right now, I feel like I have more mental bandwidth because my work is a bit easier. I'm coming to the end of, like, say, my latest work project. But I think during my very busy seasons, it is hard to sort of like summon that energy. So either I force myself, which never ends well, or I give myself time to think about, hey, do I really need to do this, or do I need a break? Do I need some time from there? And thankfully, like whenever I do take a break and I come back, maybe my engagement is down, maybe like my views are down, algorithmically wise, I'm not so hot, but I feel like at least I came back. So that's how work-life integration sort of works. It is not so much work versus life versus self versus your family and all other commitments, but it's more of all together, how can I prioritize them in a way that makes me feel fulfilled in these different areas?
Honestly, I feel like my own hypothesis is that all creators who genuinely enjoy the craft of creating content and content around a subject matter that is important to them, like for the pure creators at heart, burnout is kind of inevitable at some point, because some seasons, whether it's work, personal, whatever reasons, like some seasons are harder to have that bandwidth, as you mentioned. And so I honestly think that it's almost impossible not to have a season where you need a break, and it might be a long break. It might be way longer than you want.
Exactly.
I have had a break that was 7 months, from August 2019 till March 2020. I had like a 7-ish month break completely off social media. And that might be surprising to some people who think like, oh, Cheryl is so consistent. Like,
she's so consistent now. She's like everywhere.
That's because I had to learn from that burnout period and kind of like readjust or learn to readjust constantly.
You gave yourself the time to do the internal work, to really think about, are you really losing out? Do you really have to chase that high of a momentum?
Exactly.
And even today, just like yesterday, I went for my award ceremony as a Singapore 100 Women in Tech 2025. It was an achievement that I really, really wanted in 2023 when I heard the award existed. So when I applied for the award a few months ago, it was like kind of like a surreal experience because, hey, it would be cool if I have this award, but at the same time, I also reached the point where I don't feel like I need it to validate. It's sort of like a nice to have. But years ago, I would not have thought that way because, again, I dreadfully wanted validation. But after you get some level of validation, like after you get, like, tick off your milestones, then what? And this is something that I really had to think through also. Like where I'm at right now, I like a few years ago, I really wanted like a few things related to my career plus social media, right? I wanted to be in the media. I wanted to get awards. I wanted to at least like go one level up from my career. I wanted to like being myself. And I can say that I've achieved all of that right now. But now what? Like I've spoken to some of my friends how like technically I can just like quit social media here because I made it in my eyes. Like the achievements that I've gotten, a lot of people have never gotten it. So I think that's what made me realize like, okay, first of all, I didn't think I would actually achieve it by now. But also, now that I've achieved it by this age, what do I do next? And this before people even ask you, oh, what's next? I didn't have anyone ask me that yet, but it did make me think like, okay, so should I keep going? Is there a point to me sharing my message? And I think even today when people come up to me and say, hey, I really enjoy like your career advice, please make more, please like talk more about this, I realize that in the grand scheme of things, I see myself still sharing my message because it's still something that I felt was of value to me, and why, you know, I still try to do the things I do. Maybe I'm not the most successful, but at least I'm at the point where I feel like if I shared something that could be helpful, then that's okay. If I get a brand deal, if an opportunity for that, then I will try to do the best I can. And I no longer felt like I needed validation to know that I'm doing a good job or that I'm successful, if that makes sense.
But one thing I can't help but wonder is, even with the accomplishments, the external validations that you've acquired and the recognition you've gotten, even with all of that, my hunch is that there are still misconceptions or assumptions that people might have about you and the success and recognition that you've built and created for yourself. What are some of the misconceptions people have had about you that have made you think like, oh, that's nice, but that's not really the whole story?
In terms of like assumptions that people have on me, them thinking I have limitless energy, and me even getting the question like, why do you do so much? And I think it really comes down to, the truth is that this specifically, like this whole like balancing act of my career, my social media, my non-social media like hobbies, is just something that I feel like is a part of me, and I'm happy that these are parts of me. And I think why people have this misconception of me is because it's not simply because of, you know, how I curate my social media, because I also volunteer, and they know I volunteer. They sometimes get surprised wondering why I'm here when I'm really busy now with social media. And I think how that can be surprising and confusing to people is it takes a lot of internal work that a lot of people might not be brave enough to do, might not have the mental resources to do, to really look at yourself and say, I like who I am, but I want to change it, or I like who I am, I'm going to keep doing this. I think a lot of people don't really give themselves the opportunity to question that, and why and how that has formed sort of like a misconception. That's the bigger misconception I feel, and I hope I made sense with that. The second misconception is more like, you can just like film yourself on a camera and yap, but we both know as educational creators, it's not as simple as yapping. Otherwise, we would be bombarded with a lot of corporate messaging. The tricky part is not just yapping. The work, the sort of like the mental work also comes in terms of how do we convey this without sounding mean or rude? How when I say this way, does it make sense for my audience? Will my audience understand this, or will they twist it into another way? And that's why like I really love talking about the how like content creators create. Like even if you sort of like have to think, okay, how am I going to, I want to explore this one, but there's also this branch of thought. There's also this train of thought. Wait, I don't want to talk about this train of thought because that doesn't sound quite right. And this sort of like misconception, people don't usually see this detail because we know as content creators, people aren't usually interested in that part of it. They like hearing about wins and failures pretty much. So yeah, those are the misconceptions people have had.
When you look back at the past number of years where you've navigated the pressures that maybe you've put on yourself or that you felt from the people around you, or just the pressure of balancing multiple commitments and things that you really care about. And even sometimes you might have faced assumptions or misconceptions that are like, yeah, okay, but you know it's not exactly the full picture. And I'm sure you've also experienced negative comments at some point as well, which we didn't really get to dive into today. But looking back at the past years, despite all of these things that honestly, they're not easy. Like a lot of people would think like, oh, I want to be a creator. And then you tell them that these are the realities of creating content. And they're like, never mind. But for you, why did you keep going despite all of this?
Right. I really appreciate that question because I mean, I keep thinking back to it like at least like once a month, wondering like, why do I still keep doing this? And I think by now I can say that one of it is that, again, it's a part of me. It fills my cup. It makes me feel proud to be able to post content like what a blessing it is to be able to have a platform, share about my journey, to be able to communicate that this is the cool things that I do. This is the cool things that mean a lot to me. But also realizing that my content, it isn't just me yapping, right? It is also inspiring other people. It's making them feel seen, making them feel like, hey, I'm not alone. And I think that's what has helped me, keep going. And I think now I can add a third part of it where I think you feel like it's really easy to be kind of self-serving with when you're a content creator and you see like, here are all the cool things about me. But I think also having the platform that I have and talking to people, it isn't just about me or like my followers. I've had people tell me like, hey, this content is important for people of your community, of our community. So it's like, it's not just me, myself, and I. It's not just me and my followers, but it's also specifically my content and my work. Me sharing about it isn't just for my audience, but it's also for the larger community. Hopefully, like my content helps sort of like shift how we view ourselves as Malay Muslims, how other people can see like our community, how the community can be more diverse than just having a certain specific image or definition of success or what a person working in tech is like.
Amazing. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Not only has this journey impacted you and shaped you into who you are today, but you have impacted others as well. And now you cannot unsee the impact your work as a creator has on others. Amazing. Ainul, where can people find you on the internet?
So you can find me on pretty much like almost every social media platform. Instagram, TikTok especially. So that's where I usually post. Ain Loves Code, AIN Loves Code. I have a more corporate side on LinkedIn. And that's pretty much it. And if you in the change making space, if you volunteer, you might see my face like somewhere like randomly. especially when it comes to Malay Muslims, career discussions, and tech opportunities.
Perfect. I know. Thank you for being here on Edit's History today. And to our audience, as always, thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of Edit's History featuring Ainul Md Razib. Before we close out, I want to highlight 3 takeaways that really stood out to me. And these are lessons that matter not just for content creators, but really for anyone building something original in their career, business, or community. So number 1, creating in a space without a blueprint. So Ainul built her platform in a niche that didn't exist locally. When she started sharing tech career advice on TikTok, there wasn't a playbook for Singapore creators in that space. And most of the content at the time was comedy, food, and travel, but she chose something completely different. And this is where many of us hesitate. Right? We look for a model, a proven formula, a step-by-step process that we can replicate. But if you are waiting for certainty and a step-by-step formula, then you'll only ever be a follower. But the people who stand out are the ones who are willing to step into the unknown and experiment in that white space where the rules haven't really been written yet. And here's the paradox. That's often where the greatest opportunity lies. If you're building a podcast, a business, or any creative project, ask yourself, am I simply copying what works elsewhere, or am I willing to carve out a new lane? And Ainul's story reminds us that originality doesn't live where there is precedent. It lives where there's possibility. And that's exactly where your voice is needed the most. The second takeaway is that principles matter more than virality. So another thing that really stood out to me in this conversation is how Ainul has drawn clear boundaries around her content. She could have jumped on trending formats like salary breakdowns, those day in the life vlogs, the kind of content that racks up views pretty quickly. But she is guided by her faith, her professional responsibilities, and her community. So she decided that that's not what she's going to do. And that choice, it matters. In today's attention economy, virality is tempting, but it's also fleeting. But it is principles that give your work durability. They create clarity around what you will and will not do, and they allow your audience to trust that when they come to you, they're getting something that is authentic, not something that is algorithm friendly. Because even though trends can bring you attention, it is your principles that ensure that your work stands firm over time. And finally, representation as responsibility. So for Ainul, for example, she was representing a group of Muslim women in tech, and she was essentially a mirror of what a lot of people haven't seen before. And that's why she made them feel seen. She gave them permission to feel that they belong in spaces that they hadn't thought were possible before. And that comes with weight, because visibility, it's not really neutral, because the moment you put yourself out there, then people project expectations onto you. You're not just telling your own story, but you're shaping how others see themselves, and perhaps even how communities are seen. And I think that's something that a lot of creators will underestimate. We get caught up in the numbers, the metrics, the brand deals, and we forget that our visibility itself is a form of impact. So putting together these 3 lessons, creating without a blueprint, choosing principles over virality, and embracing representation as a responsibility, these lessons are all connected. And in particular, they are asking us to resist the easy path, because let's be honest, it's easier to follow someone else's map. It's easier to chase trends. It's easier to say, oh, I didn't ask to represent anyone. But easier rarely builds anything lasting. But instead, what builds a timeless body of work is often the harder choice: to experiment where there's no roadmap, to stay anchored in your principles when virality and trends are tempting, and also to carry the responsibility of visibility with intention. And that's why Ainul's story resonates so deeply. She's not just building a personal brand, but she's shaping what's possible for others. And in doing so, she reminds us that our work isn't just about us, but it's about what it unlocks for people who are watching, listening, and following along. So, As you leave this episode, I want to invite you to consider this question. Where in your own work are you waiting for a blueprint that doesn't exist? What principles can you anchor in, even if it means passing up some quick wins? And if your visibility represents more than just you, what message do you want it to send? Sounds good? Awesome. Let's get to work. If you enjoyed the episode, well, there's more where that came from. For every episode, I share the bonus insights, strategies, and frameworks through the Annotations newsletter. It is designed to deepen your thinking and help you take action. You can subscribe to the Annotations newsletter at CherylLau.com/email. Again, the link is CherylLau.com/email.